All right, I see a couple people still kind of jumping in, but we're going to go ahead and get started to be respectful of everyone's time. One, thank you all for being here and welcome to the CHCI Public Policy and Graduate Fellowship webinar. If you are here, that means that you are interested in potentially applying or just getting general information about our fellowship programs, so that you've come to the right place, and we're just going to go ahead and get started so you can get all the information that you need. First and foremost, my name is Pamela Sanchez. I'm the manager of fellowship programs. So I oversee all of the fellows in the fellowship program itself. I'm also an alumni of the graduate fellowship. So I've had the opportunity to do the fellowship myself and have that firsthand experience of what it's like to be a participant. But I'm now on the other side and I'm on staff and managing all of fellowship programs. So I have a little bit of insight on both. Just a quick overview of our agenda. We're going to start off our call by going over just big picture. What are our programs? Who are we? What do we do? What can you expect? We're going to talk a little bit about the policy brief because that is a big component of our fellowship program. We're going to talk a little bit more about what the benefits are of being a CHCI fellow, and we're going to break down what the next steps are for those of you who are currently in the application process. And then at the end, my favorite part is going to be our Q&A with 3 of our fellowship alumni. We have 3 alumni who are joining us today. We have 2 public policy fellow alumni and 1 graduate fellow alumni who will be engaging in a moderated Q&A session with me. And then we're going to be opening it up to all of you to ask them more pointed questions. So as you're going through the program today, make sure that you're jotting down those questions that you want more information about from our alumni. So in order to give you kind of an idea of, or not really an idea, but to start off kind of explaining who we are and what we do, we need to go all the way to the beginning, which is back in 1978, when 3 Latino members of Congress decided that there needed to be more representation of Latinos on the Hill and also in the federal, state, and local governments. And since then, we have continued to advocate to support more Latino representation in all sectors, because frankly, there just isn't enough of us in any sector. And this picture right here is actually the first picture of our very first class of fellows. So where it all started. And today, since 1978, we've grown our programs to 4 key programs. The first one is the R12 Next Gen program, which is our high school leadership development program, which brings over 100 10th to 11th grade Latinos from across the country to DC to start engaging with the political process. We also have our congressional internship program, which brings 3 cohorts a year of interns to DC to intern on Capitol Hill in personal offices. And finally, we have the public policy and the graduate fellowship, which is why you all are here and what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the time. And among all of those programs, we now are proud to have over 4,000 alumni across the country and across the world in all sectors doing amazing, amazing things. So I'm sure that many of you have already been browsing our website and know kind of a little bit of what the fellowship program is. And if you don't, I'll give kind of a brief overview of what we do. The fellowship program is a 9-month professional and leadership program. So as a fellow, you get to spend time in a congressional office learning about the legislative process, but you also get to engage in weekly sessions that focus on leadership, policy writing, legislative process, and also your personal identity. Fellows have an opportunity to spend 9 months on the Hill, and that provides the most deep experience for fellows who really know that they're super into policy, they want to get a job on the Hill. And some of our most recent placements on the Hill have been from committees to personal offices, including the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, the Office of Senator Cortez Masto, the Office of Representative Raul Grijalva, the Office of Congressman Castro, among a bunch of others. And so fellows have an opportunity to be 9 months on the Hill, but the other option is to do a hybrid placement. And what that means is that you get an opportunity to do half of your placement on the Hill within one of the offices that I mentioned, among many others, and you also get an opportunity to do a placement off the Hill. And off the Hill placements usually include nonprofits, think tanks, corporate offices, government agencies, etc. And some of our more recent placements off the Hill have been the ACLU, Brookings Institute, the Aspen Institute, Unidos US, Voto Latino, and the US Interagency Council on Homelessness. So really, the purpose of our fellowship is to really help you determine what kind of experience you want to have while you're a fellow with us. Some of you know that you want that head straight, just straight on the policy route, while others of you are interested in, yes, understanding the legislative process, but also understanding how organizations that are Hill adjacent interact with Hill offices in order to influence policy. Some quick benefits that you get as being a fellow is you get paid. A lot of fellowships and internships, unfortunately, aren't paid, but ours is paid. We also provide full health benefits. We provide a relocation stipend for, hopefully, once COVID gets by, we can all come back to DC. We provide a monthly metro stipend so that you can move around DC. And we also provide professional development funds throughout the entirety of your program. Some key dates to keep in mind for this upcoming cohort is we do have a really intense summer onboarding process. And our onboarding process is usually from June to August. And during this time, fellows are doing a lot of work researching members of Congress and issues that they're really interested in working in, as well as interviewing for placements. And so it's really intense time where they're preparing for their interviews, they're executing their interviews, and then they're deciding which offices they want to go to. In addition to that, you're also doing the employee onboarding process because as CHCI fellows, you are considered employees of CHCI. You're also doing check-ins with the program staff to really get a better sense of what you're looking to get out of this experience now that you've been selected. And really that whole summertime is to prepare you to start the program and make sure that you're ready to go from day one. And then going into day one, our orientation week, which is a full week dedicated in preparing you to begin your placements. We have Hill 101 sessions, we have writing sessions, you get to meet CHCI leadership. Obviously, you get to meet the other fellows that are in your cohort. And there's a lot of other workshops that are packed into the schedule to make sure that you start your placement on the right foot. First placements run from September to December, and then we have a holiday break in between, and then you come back for your second placement, or if you're a 9-month placement, you just continue your placement straightforward through January to May. You're in your fellowship placements from Monday through Thursday. You're working regular office hours, whatever office hours are set at your placement. And then on Fridays, you're in CHCI programming, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later on. So thinking about eligibility, in order to be eligible for the Public Policy Fellowship, is you have to have completed your bachelor's degree within the last 3 years. So anywhere from 2018 to now, and you also haven't started a graduate program. We get a lot of people who reach out to us and let us know that the system is letting them know that they aren't eligible for the Public Policy Fellowship, and that's usually because they've already indicated that they've started an advanced degree, so a graduate program. The Public Policy Fellowship is focused on individuals who've completed their bachelor's degree but have not started a graduate degree. I really, really wanted to point that out. Meanwhile, the graduate fellowship, you must have completed your master's degree within the last 2 years. So anywhere between 2019 to now. Just like anything else, we want candidates who are leaders in their community, are ready to kind of keep building on those leadership skills and growing professionally and personally. They have a commitment to service. They are US citizens or lawful permanent residents or have DACA. And all of this information is on our website if you ever want to double check or go through it a little bit more in depth. Quick overview of some of the program requirements. If you are chosen as a fellow, you are expected to do a 9-month placement in DC and work at your placement Monday through Thursday, as previously mentioned, and attend all programming on Fridays. You're also required to produce a policy brief on a topic of your choice. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what that means and what that looks like in just a little bit. You also complete the leadership profile, which is something that is part of our leadership development program. And then you complete community service hours. That is kind of on hold because of COVID. So we definitely will have more information just depending on how COVID goes. But usually all of our fellows complete community service hours. There's other mandatory events throughout your time as a fellow that you are required to attend. For those of you who've been following CHCI, you know that CHCI puts on different summits or events like the Health Summit, the Tech Summit that we recently had, an Education Summit, et cetera. We also have our annual conference. All of those events are mandatory in addition to going to your placement and attending programming. But all of that is explained in a lot more detail once you start the process. For graduate fellows, the only other requirement in addition to the ones that I just mentioned is that graduate fellows are required to moderate a policy briefing on Capitol Hill. That is only for graduate fellows, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit. So some duties as a fellow. Many of you have probably already been interns to some capacity, whether that be in a personal office of a member of Congress or with another organization, and you kind of already have an idea of the types of assignments or projects that an intern usually does. And I wanted to point out that the fellow and intern work when you're a CHCI fellow or intern is a lot different. So when an office here in DC accepts one of our CHCI fellows, they accept them knowing that they will be able to produce quality work. So you are usually not given a lot of administration work like answering phones or responding to mail or doing just like random things around the office. You're actually put to work. So you take meetings, you draft memos, you attend briefings and hearings, there's some fellows who've had the opportunity to staff their member of Congress. You potentially have the opportunity to draft legislation. And because you're younger, the comms team has been pulling some fellows to do social media content, press releases, op-eds, stuff like that. So you have an opportunity to get your hands on real work. And I've detailed off to the presentation a couple of other things that I haven't mentioned that a lot of our fellows have mentioned that they do a lot in. So when we go into our Q&A, I'm going to be asking our panelists to go a little bit more in depth and in detail about some of the projects that they did. But this really does give you a snapshot of what to expect if you're a CHCI fellow in an office. So I've mentioned a couple of times our programming. Our programming happens every single Friday. It's usually a full day of programming. And our programming, you're expected, or I guess what you can expect from our programming is to really be challenged in your understanding of policy and service, and really push to continue leveling up your leadership skills. One of the most unique parts, in my opinion, about our program is that it is really Latino focused. So within our programming, we dig into issues that affect our community, and we engage in really tough conversations about identity and self and how that impacts the way we show up in certain spaces, especially on the Hill. But we also do really cool things, like we meet fancy people, we meet members of Congress, we visit organizations when we're able to here in DC. Hopefully we get to do that again soon. And we also network with alumni. I mentioned earlier, we have over 4,000 alumni, and we really bring them in, just like as we brought them into this call, to engage with all of you and provide as much insight as they can as you move forward in your career. But really the ability to be in a group of other Latino, like young Latinos who can share different perspectives about what it's like to be a Latino in the US is really what makes our programming that much more impactful, because we dig into the legislative process, we dig into public speaking and writing and all of the things that are components of professional development, but we also really focus on personal development. And that's one of my things of having gone through the program myself and now managing the program is something that we really focus on as a big component of our programming. Sorry, looking at the chat. Yeah, so there was a question about what the leadership profile was. Let me go back to the slide. No. Oh, there we go. So one of the program requirements is a leadership profile. That's something that we dig into with part of our partnership with the GW Cisneros Institute. We have a professor who comes in and does leadership development with all of our fellows. And one of their assignments as they're going through this leadership development program is that they identify a leader that they admire, that they look up to, that they hope to embody a lot of their values as a leader. And they pretty much have a sit-down conversation with them about the type of leader that they are and things, and they ask them questions. It's almost like a networking session with this leader that they look up to in, you know, whatever sector, whatever office, anything like that, in any role. And then the fellow is expected to create a profile on them, pretty much almost like a reflection on how that conversation went, and what they got out of that conversation and how it helped them with their personal development and also their professional development, given that this is someone that they look up to. I hope that was enough. I felt like it was still a little broad, but it's definitely something that we dig a lot into within programming. But I hope that was enough to provide kind of an overview of what that assignment is. And then one thing that I forgot to mention is there is a Q&A like button at the bottom of your screen where you'll be able to drop in your questions. I see a lot of questions coming in through the chat, and that's great. But we have Marie Cho, who's actually the VP of Leadership Programs. She's monitoring the Q&A, and she might be able to get to your answers a lot quicker than by the time that I see them, since I'm focusing on the content of the presentation. So I really encourage you all to drop any questions that you have as I'm going through the presentation in the Q&A, so that hopefully Marie can jump in there and answer them a lot quicker than I can. Okay. All right, moving forward. All right, so in terms of what fellowship openings we have, like I mentioned at the beginning, many of you have probably already been looking through our website and have looked over some of the openings that we have. And so these are kind of listed of backgrounds that we ideally are looking for in terms of applicants who are applying to our programs. However, the biggest thing that I wanted to come out of sharing what our openings are is that there are no major requirements to apply. So even though you see that there are certain majors that we're like targeting, if you do not fall within that bucket, you can still apply. And the only thing that we ask for graduate fellows, specifically because graduate fellowships are focused on a specific issue area, is that the applicant has at least some background within that area. For example, like if you're interested in education, you have some experience within the realm of education that you can share. But again, the no major requirement falls within the graduate fellowships as well. We notice that a lot of applicants for the graduate fellowship are masters in like public administration. That doesn't fall into a certain concentration, but let's say that an applicant who has a master's in public administration is really passionate about housing. You can make an argument as to why your experience ties you and makes you the best candidate for the housing fellowship, if that makes sense. And so that applies to the public policy fellowship as well. If you don't fall into that targeted major area, but you have a strong case as to why you would make a great fellow, I encourage you to apply, because like I said, there's no major requirement. And I wanna make sure that all of you who are interested are applying and aren't held back because your major isn't listed. And if you have any specific questions about, you know, your circumstance, I encourage you to drop it in the Q&A. And all of these openings are on the website. So definitely check out the website and check out our current openings. Each opening has a little blurb about like specifically for the graduate fellowships, it has a blurb of what the fellowship entails, what we're looking for, et cetera. For the public policy fellowship, there's one application for everyone. You'll notice there's a public policy application and a STEM application. If you apply to the public policy application and you have, and you have a STEM major, you are automatically considered for the STEM application. I hope that makes sense. All right, so earlier I mentioned the policy brief, which is a really big component of our fellowship program. Essentially, all fellows, public policy fellows and graduate fellows, are required to complete a policy brief on the topic of their choice. Our graduate fellows specifically need to stay within their issue area. For example, the education graduate fellow can't write about diversity in clinical trials is lacking because that's a health issue and they're an education fellow. But our public policy fellows, because they don't always necessarily have a concentration that's tied to their title. You are open to choosing to write about anything that you're really passionate about or anything that you're working on within your office. We do have a partnership with George Washington Cisneros Institute that provides writing training during those programming days that we talked about, and additional one-on-one coaching once the actual writing process starts. So you're never just given this assignment to just figure out on your own. There's always a structure that we provide to make sure that you're successful in doing it. The paper is usually only like 3 to 4 pages, so think of it almost like a research paper. There's a lot of examples of submissions from previous fellows on the website, so I encourage you to, again, browse to the website, see what other fellows have done, so you can get a better idea of what that expectation for you will be as a fellow. For graduate fellows, in addition to the policy brief, you also are required to coordinate and facilitate a Hill briefing, which is pretty much just getting together a panel of the experts that, are experts within the topic that you chose to write your paper about, and, facilitate and moderate a conversation among all of them to help the audience understand why the topic that you wrote about is important. While it is the fellow's responsibility to put all of that together, CHCI works with a coach that provides training on how to do everything. So you're not expected to already come into the fellowship knowing how to do it. The purpose of this component is really to give you that experience. And so we provide the structure for you to be successful in doing it. But it only works if you put in the work. So that's a GFP only requirement. All fellows do the policy brief, but only the graduate fellows do the policy briefing. So some additional benefits of our program. I mentioned salary at the beginning. You are paid. This slide details the salary that you'll be making as a GFP and as a PPF, so a graduate fellow and a public policy fellow. This information is also online. So after this call, if you want to reference it again, it's online for you to reference and keep in mind as you're applying. Again, I wanted to point out that you do get full health benefits. You get a transportation stipend. You get a stipend for moving to DC when the time comes, hopefully soon. And you also get professional development funds. Okay, the other big benefit, and I mentioned a couple times already, is our alumni network. Maybe I'm a little biased because I am an alumni, but we have over 4,000 alumni all over the world who are the best people to network with, connect with, learn from, get insight on. And as soon as you become a CHCI fellow, you have access to all of them, which is, I think, one of the biggest perks of joining this community is that you get, not just get to work on your professional development within your cohort, within your time as a fellow, but beyond that, because you have access to so many people who are already successful and are always willing to help out a fellow alumni. And we'll hear from a couple of them, and hopefully they can share their experiences too. Let me check the Q&A really quick. So one quick question before I move forward is someone asked if you can only apply to one concentration, and this goes to the graduate fellowship, I'm assuming. No, if you want to apply to the education one, the housing one, the tech one, and the health one, and you can make a case as to why you would be the best fellow in each one of those concentrations, I encourage you to apply to all of them. Given back to the fact that there is no major requirement, we encourage you to have experience there, and it definitely makes your application stronger if you have experience. But if you can make a case and you're genuinely interested in doing and working in any of those issue areas, I encourage you to apply to every single one of them. And then, okay, I think that's all right. So next steps. So I'm hoping that if you're on this call, you've already started your application. And if you haven't started your application, I'm hoping that this will encourage you to start soon. And so I wanted to talk about what the application process looks like from here. Right now, we're in the written application part. So there's 3 rounds in total. We're on round 1. The application closes on January 31st. After that written application closes, If you move on to the second round, you'll get invited to do a recorded interview via VidRecruiter. And for those of you who get invited, you'll get more information about what that looks like, how to do that, all of that when the time comes. And then the last round is that all finalists are going to be invited to do a live interview with the program staff. And then from there, fellows are chosen. So I really encourage all of you, if you start your application, to finish it before January 31st. And wanted to point out that our application system closes January 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. Eastern time is when our application system is set to. So please don't wait until, like, for those West Coasters, if we're 2 hours behind right now, keep in mind that the application closes Eastern time. Another thing to keep in mind is that January 31st is a Sunday, and our office is closed on Sunday. So if you have any questions about the application system, or you're having any tech issues, or anything comes up that you need to contact us before the application closes, I encourage you to contact us before the end of the day Friday, because staff will not be on call that weekend of, and there isn't a hotline for you to reach out to if you need any additional information. So reach out to us the week of or before the week of if you don't want to wait until the end, but keep in mind that it is a Sunday and it's on Eastern time. Let me check the Q&A. Okay. All right, so now my favorite part, we're gonna move on to our Q&A with our alumni panelists. So I'd like to welcome Itzel, our 2018-2019 Public Policy Fellow alum, Ryan, our 2005-2006 Public Policy alum, and Jose, our 2012-2013 Graduate Fellow alum. They'll be jumping on camera soon. Thank you all so much for being here and enduring all the background for our fellowships. I'm excited for you all to have an opportunity to share more of your insights and experiences, because it's easy for me to share all the background and like high level things, but what's really the most interesting in getting the meat of what these experiences are as an actual fellow. And I'm gonna hold my tongue, having been a fellow myself, I wanna leave the whole space for you. But to start us off, if you can all take a little bit to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what your current professional role is, and what led you to pursue that, and pretty much just share a quick CHCI story with us. And we'll go ahead and start with Itzel.
Great, thanks, Pamela. So hi, everyone. My name is Itzel. I am from Utah. Originally, my family is from Mexico, and I completed the Public Policy Fellowship in 2018 and 2019, so not too long ago. I've always really had a passion for advocacy. I remember my dad taking me to protests when I was young, and then it wasn't until I had my experience of being a low-wage worker that I actually saw myself being part of politics and government working for me through my different involvement in community organizing. And so I'm so grateful for CHCI. It's led me to so many incredible opportunities, incredible people, and just experiences. And I currently work on the Hill. I'm with the House Democratic Caucus as the caucus assistant. And it's been a really great learning experience and a really great place, I think, for me to just further develop as a professional and to be able to promote platforms and issues that I care about. And even in my role now, when Pamela refers to the CHCI network, one of my directors is actually a CHCI alum. And so it's really great, the power that CHCI has, and to be able to continue and promote professionalism within Latinos.
Thank you so much, Itzel. And then Ryan, if you can take a moment to introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, my name's Ryan Murguia. I did the fellowship a long time ago, 2005 to 2006. And for me, originally from Kansas City, second generation Mexican-American, oldest child of a single mother. And I'd had some aunts and uncles who are very civically minded, and several of which have attended law school. But for me, I had no idea kind of what it entailed to be a lawyer. And so for me, the fellowship program provided that opportunity to kind of figure out if law school was right for me before kind of making that decision. And so I was fortunate enough to be selected to the fellowship program and did my fellowship with the Department of Justice in their Civil Rights Division voting section. So it's a little bit, I guess, different than the structure that's in place now for fellows. But that said, I was also previously an intern with CHCI, and I worked on the House Democratic Caucus, like Itzel. And so kind of having that experience, I kind of wanted to kind of use the fellowship as a way to determine whether or not law school was something that was right for me. And I think in the experience that I had, it was a wonderful opportunity to kind of work on two different like litigation matters that the Department of Justice was working on, involving minority voters, one involving Latino voters in Osceola County, Florida. And so I got to actually go with the trial team, was a member of that team, and helped them in securing deposition or declaration statements from several voters who had been kind of denied the ability to bring with them their sisters of choice into their voting booths. And so to be able to translate for them the testimony from these witnesses from Spanish to English was very kind of important for the case, and significant for me to know of the incredible role that plays if you're able to speak two languages. Then you're that much more of an asset to those kinds of teams. And then kind of just being able to observe firsthand what goes into kind of building a case from the ground up. It kind of takes away some of the mystique. And I think that's the case with any of the offices you are fortunate to work in. Like right now, they all seem so just unknown, like that you have no idea what goes on in these different chambers. But to actually work with the people, I think it helps to kind of be able to imagine yourself in those places. For myself, it was like, well, I could do what they're doing, so why don't I go to law school? I should go to law school. And I think that was something that was one of the key takeaways for me for the fellowship program.
Great, thank you so much, Ryan. And then we have Jose. Jose, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, folks, and I guess congrats on thinking of CHCI. I think similar to my fellow alums, it is a great choice to apply to CHCI. I did the fellowship back in 2012, so I'm getting up there when it comes to the seniors in the group. And I was a graduate fellow, higher ed graduate fellow. I was in the middle of finishing up my doctorate out of USC, University of Southern California, from California, based in California. And for me, it was just the right time to head to DC and do this fellowship. Really thinking through what professionally I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to focus on policy, but yet I had an inkling around immigration, a lot of Latino issues. I'm formerly undocumented, was born in Mexico, one of 7. And so for me, this experience was really personal because I wanted to ensure that I was doing work that benefited community, but becoming a better advocate myself. So I ended up going to DC, getting accepted. I was the higher ed fellow, and we had a secondary ed fellow as well in my cohort. I ended up working at a think tank and then also in the office of Congressman Raul Ruiz, who at that time was a freshman. So really getting to learn the ins and outs of running a congressional office, everything from signing documents and digital signatures to helping them make decisions around legislation, which was a really unique experience, especially since he was a freshman and literally the office was learning together. CHCI, and I say this wholeheartedly, and it's the reason why I'm still involved. I have the privilege of being the incoming national president for the Alumni Association. CHCI was a catalyst in how my life turned out. Since I moved to DC, it really did open up new career ventures for me. Like I said, I was finishing up my doctorate in education. I was doing a lot of work in education because of the networking and really the opportunity to expose yourself to different avenues and different opportunities. I was actually tapped to head the national outreach component of the Affordable Care Act, focusing on Latinos, a complete departure from education into healthcare. I ran the program for about 3.5 years. We were able to enroll more than 4.4 million Latinos into the Affordable Care Act. From there, I was tapped to be one of Hillary Clinton's Latino directors based out of Florida for the 2016 election. So again, huge departure going from education to healthcare to politics. Obviously we lost, and then I went into philanthropy, where most recently I managed a multi-million-dollar portfolio around health and immigration and LGBT issues for the California Endowment, which is a big foundation here in California. And then after that, I went and joined the Biden campaign to do voter protection. So all that to say that the skill set that you learn within CHCI, the skill set in terms of networking, in terms of being able to advocate for yourself and really getting out of the bubble that a lot of us are in our hometown and being exposed to all that you can do in DC is really amazing. And like I said, is the reason why I've stayed connected to CHCI. I serve on the review panel every year. I most recently was the national vice president for the Alumni Association. As Pamela mentioned, we're more than 4,000 alums across every sector. We have judges, we have electeds, we have every type of profession imaginable. And so a lot of these universities claim that, you know, the familia is the largest component of the Alumni Association. That is also the fact here with CHCI. And so I really do encourage you to apply. It is a competitive program. I never thought I was going to get in, but you never know, you know, so put effort into your application, put effort into your letters of rec, and definitely reach out if you have questions. Alums are more than willing and happy to support and hopefully welcome you into the familia. So thank you.
No, thank you so much, Jose, and thank you so much for all of you again for being here. I get really excited when alum come and chat because you hear different perspectives and it's different. For me, it's always interesting to see where everyone else ended up because we see ourselves in others who look like us and who've had similar experiences. And so you are all right here being that for the potential applicants. So before I get us started into a moderated Q&A, I encourage you all, as our panelists are sharing their insights, to keep dropping your questions in the Q&A. If you have a specific question for a specific panelist, identify that in your question, and we'll make sure to, you know, time permitting, we'll make sure to get to as many questions as we can. So to get us started off, I went in and I talked a little bit about some of the duties that the fellows do when they're in offices. That's always one of our biggest questions is like, well, what is the day-to-day life of a fellow? What are things that you are able to get your hands on? What are things that you can push to be able to jump on? What experiences are available? So if you can tell us a little bit more about your program experience, what kinds of assignments and projects you were able to work on or were you given, and if there was a project that, you know, really stood out and was the highlight of your experience. And anyone can go ahead and unmute and start.
I can get started. So I think for me, one of my favorite assignments, or just my favorite placement, was with the Ed and Labor Committee, and I was placed with the labor team. And so there, I didn't have a graduate degree because I was a public policy fellow, but I was treated as a staff member. And a lot of my staff are a lot of staff on the labor team are legal scholars, pretty much in their niche topic. And so I was kind of thrown into learning how to just read law and redline, assisting taking meeting notes when we're meeting with the committee members themselves and their staffers, learning what their priorities are, what they wanted to be champions on. And really one of my highlights for me was just getting to research and write so often and be able to be part of those important conversations with stakeholders. And I think one of the really meaningful meetings that I was able to be part of was with H-2B visa workers and learning what their priorities were and like their experiences. And there was even a moment where I had to translate for my team because they actually had an H-2B visa worker there as part of like their advocacy day. And I think for me, it was really meaningful when I was able to take the experiences that I had with these stakeholders in these meetings and those people that I saw in my community, growing up and be able to put it into effect in real life, and how the policies that we were trying to advocate at that time would really transform people's lives and their livelihoods. And I think for me, another highlight was when I was working on child labor research policy, and I didn't know what it was for. At sometimes my supervisor would just kind of throw topics at me and say, like, I need this COB. And I'm like, okay, let me get it done. And then I wouldn't know what happened to it. It would just kind of disappear in a cloud. And one time I was in the committee room and there was a hearing, and Representative Jayapal pulled out a fact sheet and she started seeing some numbers, and I was like, I remember those numbers. And then I had written the fact sheet, and so she submitted into record. And I thought that was just so cool that the work I was doing really was impactful. And I think that's what drew me back to the Hill. And it's just experiences I would have never gotten had I decided to stay in Utah. So really, really great professional development. Turn it back to Ryan or Jose.
All right. So yeah, really similar to Itzel. Again, the exposure that you have and the work that you do is, it really is amazing. I will say it over and over again that folks in their 20s are the ones that actually run this country, because a lot of times these electeds, you know, no disrespect, but they're business people. Mine was an ER doctor. So now they're coming into politics, a lot of times not knowing, you know, transportation, housing, labor, and whatnot. And so they rely on staff to, one, educate them, and many times actually help them vote accordingly. So a lot of times those fact sheets, those memos are, you know, of essential importance. For me, one of the biggest lessons that I learned through CHCI is that I hated working on the Hill. You know, and so it's probably the complete answer that alums will tell you, but I hated just sitting there and like writing memos on a daily basis. I wanted to, very similar to what Itzel said, you know, you write all these memos and you never know what happens to them. And so for me, I realized in my placements, both on the Hill and also at the think tank that I was at, that I wanted to have a more meaningful relationship to the work that I was doing versus just, you know, writing memos, which are, again, highly important. It's how a lot of the decisions are made. But for me, it taught me not only what I really was interested in, but again, being able to deduce what I wasn't into, and ensuring that I then was able to narrow down what my career aspirations were going to be. So definitely enticed with policy, but not necessarily enticed with policy making or the rulemaking behind it. And once you get on the Hill, and if you all have policy experience, you'll understand the difference between policy making, rulemaking, actual application of policy. And so for me, that was the biggest learning experience. But then again, being in those rooms, being with those folks, it's that network where you're able to really connect, you're able to develop those soft and hard skills in networking. And like I said, I was an education fellow working with a new elected, working on everything from concrete law, you know, that was like happening in Palm Springs, and like this major road construction that was happening. Again, I have no background in that, but I was doing that work. And perchance I happened to meet with someone at the White House that was going to be hiring again for this ACA role that I took on. We got to talking, they liked what I talked about, my background, and that's how I ended up getting that job. Again, complete departure from everything that I did. So in terms of lessons and like really cool experiences, again, it's that exposure and that network that you'll have. It was really cool because, you know, when I was, before I went to DC, my goal was always to be a college president. I want to be a community college president, really give back to community. And then like our third weekend, we get to go and meet Arnie Duncan, which at that point was the Secretary of Education. And I'm sitting there across the room from him thinking like, wow, I was really thinking really small. Like here I wanted to be community college president when I could potentially one day be the Secretary of Education. And again, it's that exposure that CHCI gives, and because of the legacy that it's had in DC, that you're able to connect to folks. And so really encouraging you to think and to challenge yourselves around the functional areas that you want to take on, but also challenge yourself in the areas that you might not know about and what you want to explore. And really lean into that in your application. Because I saw some of the questions folks asking around how much experience should you have? How much of a background should you have in this? I had no experience in policy. I just knew that I was a Latino in education. I wanted to be impactful, and I told my story, and that's how I got to DC. And then completely departed that and went to still, I think, make a difference, but in different functional areas. So that's a bit of my piece.
Yeah, and I guess I think I already kind of spoke to what the biggest assignment that I received as a fellow was being an integral member of this trial team, assisting with taking declaration statements from voters who had been affected by the system that was in place in Osceola County. And for me, I think like what Jose says is exactly right. I think the fellowship kind of gives you the opportunity to figure out what it is that you like and what you don't like kind of early on in your careers, and just like the exposure. Like, I mean, I think, yeah, you have your own experience in the fellowship, in the placement that you have, but I think the other unique factor of the fellowship program is the Friday meetings with all of your fellows, because then you hear what everyone else is working on and you're like, oh, that sounds really cool too. Tell me more about that. And so you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get your own experience, and then you kind of get to live vicariously through your fellows. And I think that's like also, I think it's been mentioned before, how the network is something that's very special about CHCI. And I mean, it starts with your own class. I mean, I know like within my class of fellows, we bonded significantly during the course of the 9 months, and we all kind of still remain in touch. Like we're still really close friends all these years later. Everyone's kind of gone different ways, but I think the fellowship really does kind of give you some guidance on at least like what your immediate next steps will be in your career. And like Jose said, I mean, you kind of have to be open to exploring other opportunities kind of as they present themselves. But I think as you collect these experiences, you just become that much more rich of a candidate for whatever opportunities that come down the pipeline. And I'll just say too, that like for me, like I knew kind of going into the fellowship in my placement, like at the end of it, like that was what I wanted to do. And so like, I had a goal in mind. Like I went to law school and I was like, okay, well, I want to work hard. I'm going to try and get back to DOJ. And so that was something that kind of motivated me while I was in my placement, that you want to do as good of a job as you can do, not only for yourself, but for the organization, for the community. Like I mean, they're all kind of like, you're kind of an ambassador for all of those different groups. And so you need to kind of step up and do a good job, and then that'll be recognized later on. And so I think like for me, like it came full circle when I graduated from law school, and I was able to get a placement in the honors program for the Department of Justice, which is the way that new attorneys are brought into the Department of Justice. Otherwise, you have to wait a few years and practice somewhere else before applying. And so for me, the fact that I had that experience kind of working at DOJ, and I could speak to the work that I did, and I had attorneys like that could serve as references for me in terms of what kind of an attorney I would be at DOJ and the things that I did, all kind of helped to contribute to shaping those kind of first few years of your career, and really just kind of set you up for success in the future.
No, thank you so much for sharing a lot about your background. I think you answered like 3 of my questions all in one. So you hit like 3 birds with 1 stone. So that's really exciting. One of the things that there's a couple questions that are popping into the Q&A, but before I jump over to those, one of the things that always gets brought up, whether in conversation, in our programming, once fellows are selected, and just as I'm back when I would do conversations with prospective applicants, one of the big things that they brought up was imposter syndrome of like being Latinx on the Hill, being one of the only, being that one like token Latinx in whatever spaces that you are. Can any of you speak to what it's like to be Latinx on the Hill, whether it was when you were a fellow, maybe a little after Itzel, since you're still there now? And does CHCI have any impact on how you show up in those spaces from where you started when you were a fellow to where you are now?
So imposter syndrome is real, and it's very real in spaces that are predominantly white, that are also predominantly male for those that are female identified. And especially if you're on the Hill, there's this sense of tradition, the sense of, you know, like Americana. And it was funny because for me, not having been born in this country, I always made the joke like, oh, that's not my house, it's the White House, it's like somebody else's. Because I had this disconnect. And so it really was difficult being at the Hill, being in really white spaces, being in spaces that, you know, folks have like years, you know, some people like die on the Hill, literally, like they stay there their whole lives. And so there is a learning curve, a cultural curve as well, being able to go into those spaces, learn how they write. I was coming in with academic writing, and you go on the Hill and it's like, I need a 1 page with like 15 bullet points and that's it. And here I was like in the middle of a dissertation, you know, that was 180 pages long. And so there's a lot of like cultural differences. But again, that is the role of CHCI. That is the role of the cohort. That is the role of Friday programming, to ensure that you have a network, that you have a sounding board of fellows. There's also, again, the Alumni Association. There's another Congressional Hispanic Staff Association on the Hill. CHCI covers membership. So there's a lot of avenues that you're able to take on that will be a support system. One of the other things that I did was that I joined a kickball team, which, you know, might seem random, but you also have to find a base in the city for yourself so that you also find outlets that are pertinent to you. You know, there was a question in the chat around, you know, like, how do you deal with like white supremacy and really white spaces? For a lot of folks, because, you know, the age range tends to be younger. I was the oldest fellow. I was 29 when I came into the program. And so it was really important for a lot of folks. And, you know, now that, you know, we have tons of alums, you know, folks come out as queer, folks come out as trans, folks come out as multiracial. CHCI is doing a lot of work now on equity and, you know, and the biracial identity of a lot of Latinos within programming. So it really does serve, you know, this piece that you're away from home, you're in a completely new city, you're doing completely different work. And it's an opening space for a lot of folks. You know, there's a support group, very informal, for folks that are queer, you know, gender nonconforming. There's, you know, different subsets within the association to support folks. And so if you have concerns around like, am I going to fit in because of X reason? More than likely there will be a space for you. And if not, CHCI will do its part to ensure that programming reflects those differences. And so it is a learning experience, but now that I moved to DC, I'm able to really move anywhere and really, you know, take root because of that experience and being able to navigate those spaces.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Jose, for providing that background and that personal experience and sharing the resources that are available to fellows, to alumni, and the work that we still continue to do every single day. So transitioning over to the Q&A, one of the big things that keeps popping up in the Q&A is about the salary. So the salary is an entry-level salary, and I wanted to drop a quick plug of what you see as a salary is really reflective of what an entry salary on the Hill is right now. And so one of the big questions that people are asking is, how do fellows survive on the lower end of the salary in DC, right? We all think about it. I thought about it. I still think about it. And so can any of you share your experiences with being creative, living on a fellow stipend, with being creative about housing and how you're able to make it to be able to do this experience even on a lower end? Because I know we're thankful that we're able to provide a salary, but we know it's not enough for what the DC cost of living is, but we get creative. So can anyone share?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing, oh, go ahead, Itzel. I was just gonna say, I think the thing is to remember that it's just temporary. Like this this moment in time is temporary, and you can do anything for 9 months. It's not a long time. You can make it work. A lot of fellows live together, so like it kind of just increases the bonding potential. Like if you all live like in a share a house, and you split the rent 3 or 4 ways, then it suddenly becomes possible to live in DC. And then I think you kind of just become really good at managing your money. I mean, you don't eat out a lot. You like pack your lunch. On the Hill, they have a lot of briefings, and those sometimes have food, and you just learn to be resourceful and hit up the ones that have the food, the receptions. There's a lot. I mean, this is, I guess, I don't know, back in the days before COVID, but like there would be receptions kind of on the regular, and so you would pack a light lunch and then feast on a reception later in the evening, and just kind of be judicious about your resources, and realize that it's temporary, and that it really is something special to have this opportunity. And so like even though the salary doesn't seem like much, what you're getting in the way of the experience is pretty invaluable.
Yes, I agree with Ryan wholeheartedly. I think you learn to be frugal. And the great thing about being in a city like DC is there's so many free entertainment and activities. And yes, definitely take your Tupperware when receptions are a thing again, so that you can pack lunch the next day after the reception.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's definitely always a question, and you definitely do get creative. Another plug that I will make is going back to our alumni network. Our alumni network here in DC is super, super, super helpful in providing resources to incoming fellows, providing housing resources. A lot of alumni in DC own their own apartments. They've been here for a while, they own houses, condos, whatever, and they rent it out to fellows at a lower rate than had it been anybody else. So there is a lot of support and advice to be creative in DC living on a lower salary. So it's definitely doable. One last question. I know we're literally at time, but if you all can stay just a couple more minutes to answer one last question from our Q&A is, how did you manage to make the most out of the CHCI fellowship? What experience do you believe was the most impactful, and how did this experience help you in your current career? And that was a big question. That's why I needed to ask it. So
I can go. So again, I mean, this experience will be what you make of it. Regardless of, the experience that you have or whatnot, how prepared you come, where you end up in office. My biggest takeaway from CHCI didn't happen on the Hill, and it didn't happen in my placement. It happened outside of that. It happened during those receptions that Ryan mentioned. It happened networking, and it happened actually me leaving CHCI programming to go and find myself within the city. And so very cliche, but you get what you put into it, is, I think is timely and forever true of CHCI. There's a lot of fellows that come in and are really shy, and they're like set in their ways, and they go home right after programming or right after work. And they're usually the ones that, end up going home and, don't necessarily come back to CHCI. But it's those folks that really put themselves out there, take risks, go and meet folks that are the ones that are able to land jobs, that are, folks that are memorable, and that folks remember them when a position comes up, and they'll call them up and be like, hey, I remember talking to you at this event. Are you so interested in this? And really, I cannot highlight how much of that was my story. Literally playing kickball, I met someone that I then met at this event, from the White House, and then ended up getting connected, and now we're best of friends. And, now she's an advisor to President-elect Biden. So, all happenstance. And again, it happened playing kickball. I'm not even on the Hill. So, just be open and be adventurous. You're out there. It's once in a lifetime opportunity.
So I agree with Jose. I think for me, how I managed to make the most out of the CHCI fellowship is when I felt, you know, lost in the city or unsure or just doubtful about myself or what my journey was next, because people are always planning and asking you, so what are you doing after the fellowship? It's like, okay, hold up, I just got here, I'm learning the ropes. And I think my cohort really helped me. And I think all the times after Friday programming where I would meet, like even after Friday programming was over, we'd head to a bar or we'd head to a reception and we'd be all together. We continue talking and learning about each other and kind of just what our beliefs were, because not everybody is the same within political ideology. And so I think those conversations really helped me shape kind of what my thoughts are and what I continue learning. And I think it's also really important because they're your peers. And even if you might not be working in the same field right now, this is a small world and you're going to be professionals with them in the future. You never know how you'll run into, how Jose ran into his kickball buddy at a different event. And so I think building those relationships is really important. And I know that even now, I check in regularly with a lot of my cohort members, whether it's daily or it's like a monthly phone call. And I think as a first generation student and professional, it's a support that I'm going to continue using throughout my whole career in life. I think it's just invaluable and irreplaceable.
No, I really don't have very much to add to what Jose and Itzel have already said. But yeah, I think the beauty of the fellowship program is you have all these young idealistic kids, I guess kind of using that term loosely. I mean, anywhere from, I think I saw a question like what the average age is, like some people in their early 30s, like that's still a kid. And like, just like eager to kind of embark on this journey. And everyone has just different ideas on ways to change the world. And that's like the beauty of it. Like you have your own idea of what's going to be impactful and someone else has their ideas, and like together, it's just like, wow. Like, I mean, yeah, not everyone has the same policy interests, but like, I mean, if anything, like you realize like how interconnected all of these issues are, and like the impact that this cohort will have in the future, and that you're a part of that. And that's like really special. I think the only other additional thing that I would add that kind of another kind of truism maybe would just be to be grateful for everyone who like wants to help you, because there's a lot of people like when you're a fellow and they like, oh, like what are you going to do next? Like Itzel says, you don't know, then like people are willing to kind of like offer unsolicited advice. And I think like it's nice that they care about you as a fellow, and like people like fawn on the CHCI fellows in DC. Like it's the thing, like it's like, oh, this is the new class, and like the old class is like, okay, cool, they're cool, but like the new class, like they want to get to know the new class, and so they're all over the CHCI fellows as soon as they're announced, as soon as they land in DC. So just being mindful of like thanking people for their time, because I think, again, that goes a long ways, because people like to feel like appreciated, like that they're making this effort to get to know you, and that you you see them, and that you like appreciate the effort that they're making to want to help you.
No, well, thank you so much for being here, for staying a little late, for dropping all of your wisdom and your insight about not just your experiences, but what the CHCI Fellowship can potentially do for our potential new class and for prospective fellows. So thank you all so much for being here. I cannot thank you enough. So just last few things, this webinar has been recorded. So in the next 24 hours, if you want to come back and listen to all of our alumni drop more wisdom again, you can definitely go and look over the webinar recording tomorrow. Oh, give me a little bit, let's say Friday. And then again, the deadline was extended to January 31st or 31st. You are the first to know. We haven't updated the website yet. So for those of you who were chatting in, you're like, the website's still not updated. Yes, you are the special ones who get to find out first that you have an extra 2 weeks to finish your application, so that it's perfect. So again, thank you all for joining. I'm going to stay on a little longer because I know there's still a couple logistical questions in the Q&A that Marie's frantically getting to, and I'm going to hop on and answer some of those as well. But our panelists, you are free to go. Thank you so much for being here. You know, prospective applicants, I can't wait to read all of your applications. Stay on if you have any other questions. I'll be answering them live and in the chat. But panelists, you're free to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
So I am staying on, as mentioned, going to be answering questions in the Q&A. So if you haven't gotten an answer from a question that you dropped, bear with us as we go through and answer them. You can also, and I didn't share this, you can also email me. I'll go ahead and drop my email in the chat if you have to go, but you haven't gotten any of your answers. So I dropped my email in the chat. Feel free to email me if you have any specific questions about your application, your situation, anything that wasn't covered in our call today. Feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to connect with you and give you as much information as possible so that you feel confident in applying.